Welcome to Read, Watch, Play, your weekly dive into the stories we love and how they're adapted, discussing the genesis of our favorite books, movies, and games, and our sometimes not so favorite adaptations of those. We are coming to you live from behind enemy lines this week at David's Cannibal Cold Camp. This is episode 4, and we are finishing our coverage of The Last of Us Part 1, the video game and show. My name is Randy Berridge. I'm here with Nick Hinkson, our resident bloater. Here we go. Are you a watch live person when something comes out on like HBO? Are you a watch the next day? Or I know some people also wait until it's entirely released and then binge watch it. What is your typical approach to TV?
All of the above.
Yeah.
Yes. I like to watch things live when I can.
Yeah.
But I feel like a lot of the newer release formats don't really allow for that anymore. They'll drop like 3 or 4 episodes at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll watch them over a day or two. Because I don't, if they drop, 3 episodes of a show that's an hour long, I don't really have 3 hours on Tuesday night to watch the show. But I'll definitely watch it like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I hit all of them.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially I think...
But something like this, where it was a week by week, I watched about half of them live and half of them the next day, depending on probably football or baseball, whenever it came out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Sunday night HBO is one of the few that we will... It's like you clear the calendar for and watch.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think... I'm a big fan of the 2 episode releases because you have setup, payoff, setup, wait a week.
Yeah.
And you get enough of that, what's the word? You get enough of that satisfaction from having a setup, a payoff, and a setup that you're excited for the next week with 2 episodes. But if you do 3 or 4, you have a lot of those cycles and you might get enough of what you need to where you wait 2 weeks to watch the next 4, even though they came out a week later.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually something we didn't talk about with the first 2 episodes of The Last of Us. This was supposed to originally have been a 10-episode season, and episode 1 was going to cut off when Joel threw that kid's body into the fire, and the HBO execs, I forget if it was the execs or the focus group or somebody, told them that was just too dark to leave a week to go by. And you don't really get to meet Ellie in the pilot then. And there's not as much draw to come back. And the creators actually really agreed with them. And that's why they extended out the first episode to get fully to, meeting Ellie and them leaving the QZ, and I think that was the right choice in the end. I think if they would have just released that first episode and it was 40 minutes, I think it would have been received worse than this pilot, which was received very well.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think you really can expect an audience who hasn't played the game to want to come back if you
just
end
punch
on
my
such
mic, sorry.
morbid note. Yeah, right. I didn't know that till you just said that, and I'm immediately my reaction is no.
Totally.
I don't know if I would come back knowing the rest of the show wouldn't be that, if that's how that ended.
Yeah, that's just, I don't know. You haven't created any sort of relationships or draws yet to bring back, where when you get that extra half hour with Ellie and Tess and Joel, you kind of know who your crew is and who you're riding with for the series. And you don't get that if you cut off with Joel throwing a child's body in a fire. You're like, oh, here's this guy I thought I liked. Yeah. And now he's completely shut off after the death of his daughter. All right. Yeah. I mean, before we move on, getting into the heart of the discussion, just a note on the spoilers again. We won't be talking anything from Last of Us Part 2. I'm sure in generalities, Last of Us Part 2 might come up, but we're not going to spoil anything from the game. But we will be covering the entirety of the first game, the Left Behind DLC, and Season 1 of the show in full here. So let's get into it. I got some rapid fire questions for you. You ready to go?
Let's do it.
Rapid fire questions. In the game, are you a brick or are you a bottle guy?
I'm a brick guy.
Brick.
I'm not a maniac. I'm a brick guy.
You're a brick guy?
Are you not a brick guy?
I'm a brick guy. I think there's something more satisfying about knowing that I'm yeeting a brick into some clicker's face. But if I have to, I'll hold a bottle. Especially because there's some parts where it's hard to come by stuff, and they become really handy. These are also supposed to be rapid fire questions. I'm not supposed to expand, but what do you think is the most devastating scene of the season?
Sam.
Yeah, agree. Clickers, runners, bloaters, and stalkers. If you had to take one in a fight, which are you going for?
All of the above. What do you mean? I got that main character energy, baby.
All of them?
All of them.
Yeah. No way you're taking a bloater.
You see that? I've been working out, baby.
I think the easy answer here would have been stalkers. Actually, and I'm not even sure if stalkers were in the first game. But they freak me out. They really freak me out. I think I would take my chances with a runner if I had to pick one.
No, and here's why I have to disagree. One, just to clarify, I can take none of these in a fight. I am dead I eat so much like gluten and wheat that I'm the first one turned, right? But if I had to fight one, and those runners, they're coming at you so fast, and even if you like if they get on you, they'll bite your fingers, they'll bite whatever because you're all falling with them. The stalkers were slow moving.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you and I are athletic enough that we could hide from a stalker. We could get away from a stalker because they're a little slower.
Yeah, runners are a little chaotic energy. I don't know if I could handle that. But I don't know. I'm not sure the speed of a bloater, but I'm also wondering if I could outrun a bloater and just tire it out.
They were pretty slow in the game. Like you were able to move around them as you took them away.
Yeah.
But like if you were in a room with them, you weren't getting out of that room.
No, yeah. All right. Yes or no? Can't give any more than that. Did Joel make the right decision at the end?
I know you just said I can't give any more than that. But I'm going to say save who you can save.
Yeah.
And that's my answer. Is that acceptable? Does that work?
I'll allow it. All right. Just a quick sip of coffee.
That's a hard. You're setting me up to be canceled with that question. You can't. That's a hard one.
I don't even have an answer. So that's why I'm refusing to answer.
And we're definitely going to talk about that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Similar as last time, actually, we're going to flip the order. We're going to talk a little bit about these episodes at large, 4 through 9, and then we're going to cover some categories that kind of just recap the full season and the full game. I'm not going to dive too deeply into what happened in every episode, but just to kind of ground people if they haven't watched it since it premiered. Episode 4 is right after Ellie and Joel left Frank and Bill's town, and they're heading to Kansas City. It's where they meet Henry and Sam, and they find the militia that had overthrown Fedra there. And we move through 2 episodes there, and then we move into Jackson. Ellie and Joel find their way to Jackson, Wyoming, and they find Tommy, and they set out from there. And then we see, that was episode 6, I believe. Episode 7, we see kind of the flashback episode of Left Behind, the DLC from the game, of Ellie and Riley and their time in the Fedra camp and what happened to Riley and how we found Ellie at the start of the series. And then we move into our final 2 episodes. Episode 8 finds Ellie and Joel separated and Joel injured at David's cannibal camp, which we're recording at today. And then we move into our finale where Ellie gets taken by the Fireflies and Joel makes his decision at the end on what he thinks needs to be done. So just a quick recap of what we saw in those episodes before we move in. What do you think are the standout episodes from kind of this middle and end of season 4 through 9?
For me, there's 2.
Yeah.
And I went back and forth on it a lot, but I couldn't pick between episode 5 and episode 8. And I think it's specifically the end of episode 5 that is such a gut punch. And it might have been the biggest gut punch of this season because of how well it was set up and how well it was acted and some of the adaptation choices, which I'm sure we're going to go into. And then, but episode 8 as a whole, and knowing where that was in the game and seeing how they brought that to life, I was on the edge. I knew exactly what was going to happen, and I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. So I have to say both, but it's really the end of episode 5, but all of episode 8. I can see it in my head still. It was that good, I think. But
yeah,
I think it's tough to narrow it down. But what'd you have?
I agree. What is interesting as I started to narrow it down and I actually did the rewatch, I found myself appreciating more about what I thought was the slowest episode, which was actually not slowest, but the least impactful episode being Jackson. We rewatched that, and I also realized how pivotal that episode is in developing Joel and Ellie's dynamic. And you have the big conversation where Ellie thinks Joel is going to just hand her off to Tommy, and she finds out about Sarah. And I mean, those are character and relationship defining moments about the most important relationship in this game and in a story that is driven by this relationship. So that episode is huge. But I agree with you. I think episode 5, I was writing this down as we were watching it. It's almost the most Last of Us episode that they could have made. You are in this episode creeping through these city buildings, trying to avoid, the militia and any infected that may be down there. You eventually have this horde that attacks and, kind of the sniper shootout from the game. You have, this battle between the militia and the infected at the end. You have the devastation of someone turning infected and having to kill them. I mean, this I think had the most beats of what this story contains out of any episode of this season. And I really appreciated that. And it was the only time we really saw, outside of episode 2, like a real swarm of infected. And it also just reminded me of the game. I think when you meet Henry and Sam, this is kind of after a lull of you're just traveling around for a while, and not a lull, but you're just at a part where you're traveling around a lot with just Ellie and Joel, and that's amazing. And you're building this dynamic and this relationship. But the scene in the game when you meet Henry and Sam, and then Sam gets killed because he turns infected. I mean, that was another hook into me that made me love the game. And I didn't think that they could do that better in the show, and they did. Like, they really did it better. And I think something will come a little bit more into like the best adaptation choices from this, but I agree. Episode 5 was just incredible.
I think I just real quick want to jump back to what you were saying about the episode in Jackson.
Yeah.
And in the last episode, we talked a lot about how relationships are the foundation of this show.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a generality, not really a spoiler, but that sets up the relationship between Tommy and Ellie, which is so vital for what's coming, that it's, as someone who's played the games, I thought that was so important, and I think they did it well. And the payoff from the Jackson episode that I know is coming in season 2 is what makes that Jackson episode so good.
Yeah.
Like the emotional scene where Tommy and Joel see each other for the first time, that was acted brilliantly. I thought they crushed that moment. Yeah. I really do. And then everything that you see Ellie with the distrust and slowly gaining that trust with Tommy. And I'm blanking on the character's name, but Tommy's wife,
Maria,
when she's getting a haircut and learning about Sarah. And I think I could see, like, from an outside perspective where that might be a little bit of a slow episode, but I actually felt that was one of the most important episodes of the second half for that reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, and something that's interesting, we were talking about a lot of what it's like doing an adaptation of a game versus a book. Something that's interesting in the game is, like, at this part when you're in Jackson, you don't actually go into Jackson, I believe, in the first game, because I remember Neil saying they didn't have the budget to do that. You were just kind of around, like, you went to, like, the dam around Jackson. And there is a part where Joel and Ellie split up for a little bit. And Joel, you're talking to Tommy. And in a game, you don't have the luxury of, like, seeing that Tommy and Joel conversation while also seeing the Ellie and Maria conversation. And that's something great that they can do in the TV show, where we can see both of these taking place. Because in the game, you just come back and you get the sense that, like, something happened while you were separated from Ellie, and now she knows about Sarah. Like, something is off, but you don't know what that conversation looked like. So it was really awesome to be able to get to see both sides of that. And that's one of the beauties of TV right there.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I think you just nailed that. That I hadn't thought about it in that way. And I think the second you said it, I was like, you're right. They nailed that.
Yeah. Yeah. I do. I agree with you too that episode 8 was big for me. But I think I'll save my thoughts a little more fully when we get to the categories on why that is. Okay. But I also love that one. That was my most anticipated for sure. What do we have next here in the episode discussion? What were you most excited to see adapted from this game through these episodes?
I mean, honestly, episode 8, the winter scene was, for me, one of the most terrifying parts of the game. And I think it shows really well what can happen when things go wrong in a society, like a post-apocalyptic society, and you have the wrong leader and a guy who's making just abhorrent decisions. And then Ellie is this child who finds herself, trying to save Joel, and this guy is clearly just manipulative, and there's something inherently evil about him. And I was worried they were going to A, cut it out, or B, not do it justice. And they did neither of those things. They kept it in, and I really liked how they did it. I think they made a couple of changes to that scene, but I think it worked really well for TV, the changes they made.
Yeah, I agree. There was almost an aspect of my first live viewing of season 1 where my anxiety for getting to this part in the show was like ruining the episodes before it, because I was so worried, like, how are they going to do this well? is it going to make me feel the way I felt when I played the game? That I was just like, when is it coming? And especially it came a lot later in the season than I was expecting it to. I kept thinking it was going to be like episode 6 or 7. And when it wasn't happening yet then, and it was held off till 8, I was like, when is it? Are they skipping this? Like, what is going on? So when we rewatch the season, I think that's also, a little bit with the last topic. That's why I enjoyed some of those middle episodes a lot more, because I was safe knowing that episode 8 was coming and we were going to get here.
Yeah.
But I agree. That was the winter chapter in general was what I was most looking forward to. There were some other small things. I was excited to see the giraffe scene. I was excited to see the conversation in Jackson when Ellie finds out about Sarah. I was looking forward to a few of those things, but this was, I think you hit it right from the start. This was what I was most eager to see.
Yeah, I think this was one of 2 times. The end of this episode where Joel and Ellie reunite is probably the second time in this season where I wanted to cry. Like, genuinely, I was so sad that happened.
Yeah.
And I knew it was coming, and I was just so sad that entire episode, knowing how it was going to end and what was going to happen and who was going to have to do it. That I was heartbroken.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think of any other big. There's the obvious big story beats, getting to the end of the game and seeing how that comes to life. But it's almost similar to, spoilers for Game of Thrones. When I had read the Mountain versus the Viper fight, when he becomes Tyrion's champion, I was so anxious. And during that season, knowing that this was coming, and this was a very similar feeling to, like, nothing else kind of mattered. I was like, I just need to get to this point and see how they do it. And I feel like they did it. And, I was really happy with it. But this is also kind of the beauty of the adaptation, where I think that we talked about this a lot last episode. What almost becomes really meaningful are the areas they expand that are a little bit new for me, that happened within the game, but you just don't have the luxury of seeing in a video game. Like, I really enjoy those things in the show because they're wholly new to me. And that's what you expanded on a lot with, the Bill and Frank episode last time.
Yeah, I think you called it the value-added scenes.
Yeah.
Right?
Actually, the writer, Craig Mazin, called it that. I don't want to take credit for it.
Okay.
I stole his words.
You brought that term to me in the last episode, though. So
yeah, I invented that. Yeah, it's my own literary device.
Randy is the premier Hollywood writer at HBO.
Yeah, so. One can dream.
But speaking of adapting things, we can't not talk about the cameos. In the last 6 episodes, there were, I think, 3 pivotal cameos. You had Ashley Johnson, who is Ellie in the game, is now Ellie's mother in the show. Loved that. You had Troy Baker, who is Joel, and you had Jeffrey Pierce, who is Tommy. I get that, being a video game kind of has an unfair advantage in this respect, but is this kind of like the best use of cameos we've seen in an adaptation?
I think it might be. And there's some recency bias to this, because the easy approach is you just take that person, you're on the lookout for them, and you throw them in. I'm thinking of, in the Uncharted movie, what's his name? Nolan North, I think is his name. is, he's sitting on the beach when they crash in the water and they walk up and they see him. Or like I remember in the Jurassic World movie, like Jimmy Buffett is like drinking a margarita at the Jurassic World Park and like runs away when like a dinosaur comes, and like those are fun. But I think when I think of the best use of cameos, this is on another tier where they did such a good job of integrating them into the show and not only making, use and paying homage to them, but it's like they really made Ashley and Troy Baker and Jeffrey Pierce and, Marlene is, Merle Dandridge is Marlene, it's not even a cameo.
Right.
They made them feel like really valued about them being the people who brought these characters to us originally, and probably felt really respected. They were involved in all the promo. They got pretty key roles in this season, not just kind of like, a throwaway C character. Troy, was the host of the official HBO podcast for the show as the episodes were airing. And I think this is a perfect way to show the audience and those actors that, like, hey, like HBO, like we care that this is important to you. And we know you have an emotional attachment to these voices and that they were a massive part of the success of this game. Like, let's bring them in a real way that makes them feel some agency over this and not just be a silly cameo. So I think that was huge.
Yeah, I have nothing to add.
Yeah.
I think you nailed that.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Troy and Jeffrey were fun. Were you going to say something else?
Nope, go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to say Troy and Jeffrey were really fun in their roles, and Jeffrey Pierce, or I think his last name is Pierce. Let me look that up. We have it in our notes.
Yeah, Jeffrey Pierce.
Yeah, because his name is Perry in the show, and is his name Jeffrey Perry? They were fun in their roles. Also, oh my God, like the flow and the beard on Jeffrey Pierce, like I feel like that guy, he was just posing with that gun walking around the entire episode. But, just hearing his voice as he should have. Yeah. His voice, as soon as you hear him, you're like, wow, that is Tommy. Like that is Tommy. And Troy playing, David's sort of right-hand man in the cult camp, they were fun. But to me, like Ashley's was just so emotional and just so nuanced. And I think Ellie she probably is my favorite video game character ever. And
really?
Yeah. And Ashley's voice is so identifiable as Ellie. So to see her as Ellie's mom and for us to see where Ellie actually came from and to have the actor who is Ellie birth, the new version of Ellie as Bella, it's like so poetic on so many ways. And it's just incredible. And I think just seeing also just the torment of like how she was brought into this world is just like so sad on so many levels. And to have that kind of cold open in episode 9 of something new, where I was heading into this episode thinking, I know where this is all going now. And to be really caught off guard and seeing Ashley Johnson running, that was definitely the most emotional part of the season for me, where I was like, are they really doing this? Like, is Ash, because I didn't know who Ashley was going to be. I knew she was going to be in it, but I didn't know who she was going to be. So to find out she's Ellie's mom it just hit in so many ways.
Her name is Ellie. How long have we known each other? Our whole lives. So you pick her up right now, and then you kill me.
Yeah, I love that. It gave a lot of depth to why Ellie is the way that she is and that she's immune. And like you said, the iconic voice. And I think when I was thinking back on it, I really felt that it added a layer of depth to the Marlene and Ellie relationship that made me even more frustrated with the Fireflies and Marlene. And I think they really used that opportunity well to just add a little bit of a punch there.
Totally. Yeah, I kind of forgot that Ellie was aware of this. I was just replaying the game, and she mentions in very early on in meeting Joel, when Joel's trying to figure out, like, why is this girl important? That Ellie throws out offhand. She's like, oh, Marlene knew my mom. And I honestly didn't remember that originally. But to see the depth of what that actual relationship was between Marlene and Anna, which is Ellie's mom's name, it makes it so much more devastating. Like everything about it. And Craig Mazin talked about afterward the decision, I think him and Neil, to, why put that in episode 9 and not earlier as an origin story for Ellie. And they say, you kind of need to see who Ellie is through all of these episodes. And it makes it that much more impactful and sad to see that this is like how she came into the world, this girl, and why she is the way she is, because it just resonates a little bit less if you get that right off the bat. But yeah, so good. There's one other cameo, but I think I'm going to save that for our Easter eggs. Yeah, you'll know when I say it, because it was actually pretty hit. Okay. It was hidden really well as a cameo. It was one more fun tradition. Like, what do you think of when you think of a cameo? We'll get there.
Was it someone from the game?
Yeah.
Like an actor?
Yeah. Yeah, voice actor from the second game. But she was actually in the first game as well. So reprising her role. Yeah. So what I wanted to move on to next was we have another side quest episode here. Episode 7, which is the Left Behind. And we get to explore Ellie's life before the game and before the television series now. And we get to see her relationship with Riley and how we found Ellie, not only physically, in the game, like how we found her in the Boston QZ, but really how we found her mentally when she was in that room at the beginning of the show and the game. How did this episode hit for you? We're coming right off the Jackson episode and we move into this. And this is starting sort of, we're past the beginning and middle, and we're heading into the sort of the third act. And we find ourselves in kind of another expansion of the story episode. How did you like episode 7?
This might be a hot take. It was a miss for me.
Miss?
Yeah. And, I realize how important this episode is. I thought the visuals were great. I thought it was pretty well acted. And I really can't put my finger on it, but I felt like something was missing. And I don't know if it was just, I didn't have the belief of the Riley-Ellie relationship between those two actresses. I don't know, something, it just didn't click. And I realized it was well shot. It was well acted. The visuals were great. The information you gain is so important.
Yeah.
And it was a good episode of TV. Don't get me wrong. Like, it was an above average episode of TV.
Yeah.
But we talked about this a lot last time. And I think this whole show and game is built about relationships.
Yeah.
And if you don't nail the early relationships, the relationships in the future don't mean as much. And it does. And I just really didn't get it from that episode. Something was, I don't know. That's how I feel. And maybe you disagree with me completely on that, but I just felt like something was off.
Yeah, I don't think it was a miss for me, but if I'm ranking, episodes 1 through 9, it falls on my lower half for sure. And I think this is an interesting one where they're converting this expanded game content and something that most people, I think you said you played this before. You actually played The Last of Us, the Left Behind DLC.
Yeah.
But I played it after. And in that format, it was like I'd already experienced The Last of Us. And I was going through that post-mortem where I'm sad the game is over and I just want to be in that world a little longer. And at that time, I didn't think there was ever going to be a part 2. And I was like, oh, thank God I can just play this game and a little bit longer and be, with Ellie. And, I thought it was going to be this fun side quest DLC, and it turns out to be the most devastating thing ever, where you realize that, this person that Ellie, likes, in a relationship way, and is also her best friend, dies and Ellie doesn't.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, this is horrible. And now I'm even feeling worse than I did when I finished the original game. But it came after. And I think what was tough is that it did slow, I think, a little bit of the momentum of the season. And I think this is also where I was feeling I was so anxious to get to winter in the television show that this episode, it's almost like I blacked out. Once I realized that this was happening this episode, I was like, oh, well, I was just so eager for the next one. But rewatching, I did really enjoy it. And I thought Storm Reed did a great job as Riley, but it's tough to place an expansion story like that into the kind of heading towards the climax of the season, where it does feel like you took a little bit of a detour while you're kind of coming down the hill of the roller coaster. Or I guess if it's a climax, while you're reaching the peak.
Yeah.
So I can understand that.
Yeah, and like I said, I know it's a good episode. Like objectively, it was very well done. It was very well acted. It just something missing.
Yeah.
There was something that Bill and Frank episode, there was something that hit there that I felt didn't hit in this. And I'm not trying to make it like a relationship comparison, but I'm thinking of like the emotional connection to the episode.
Yeah.
Something in like that episode or in episode 5 with, Sam and Henry, those things just hit hard. And I felt like this episode was supposed to hit harder than it did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I don't think your perspective is dissimilar to how a lot of people feel. I don't think this is anyone's favorite. And I mean, even when we're ranking within the episodes, to say that this is like ranking in the lower half is like, it's still an excellent episode of television.
Right. Yeah.
It's still great.
Yeah.
But like through the necessity of ranking, it just falls a little bit lower compared to some of the other things we saw. All right. Moving on. Can you recall when you originally played the game how you felt when you realized, Joel's decision to save Ellie at the end? And, now you're probably, 10 years older from then. Do you still feel the same one? And was your reaction to Joel saving Ellie different in the show versus the game?
Those are really hard questions.
Yeah.
And I think actually when I first played it, I felt the decision and the choice I would have made was much more black and white.
Totally.
And now when you watch it and I was thinking about it and playing back, and I feel there's a lot more of a gray area in how do you define right and wrong?
Yeah.
And there is no objective morality here, because we're not talking about Joel going into a government facility and taking down, in a secure location where the scientists have figured everything out and there's like one thing they need and this and that. We're talking about essentially a pseudo-terrorist organization who has doctors who think they've thought of something and figured something out.
Yeah.
And now you're asking a child to make a decision that will literally be life and death on information you don't have. And I don't understand how you could remove the emotional aspect of it if you're Joel, or what should have been Marlene's emotional aspect to this too, which I think it was acted brilliantly, written brilliantly. It was the character Marlene. I'm not trying to knock the performance.
Yeah.
Disclaimer there. I thought the performance was great. I loved that it was an episode that you got to A, see Joel go beast mode like you have in the game. And then B, after that, it's super emotional. And then after the emotional aspect, you were left sitting, watching the end credits, and you have something to think about for a month.
Yeah.
And you're never going to get to an answer. I just rambled a lot about that, but I love how the show ended. I loved playing that. I loved seeing how they adapted that. And it's so conflicting,
Yeah.
So like my reaction was different because I'm older and I have more empathy than I did, when it first came out. And I think it's a gut-wrenching decision to have to make an episode of TV.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an impossible decision to make. I agree that it felt more black and white originally. And there's maybe two things that I think inform that for me personally. One, as the game, you are an avatar of Joel. And I have spent 20 hours protecting this girl, this child. And when I'm off the heels of seeing her, kill David in the restaurant. So you've already built up these intense feelings towards Ellie. And then to see her get taken, and you probably have, I don't know, a 3-ish hour end of fighting to get to her, where in the game you're dying multiple times and failing. And it's like there was such tunnel vision of getting to that room where she was and trying to save her that I didn't even question it, whether it was right or wrong. And even when I finished it, I didn't even think again if I made the right decision. I was almost exactly what they had in the show, where there's no noise. You are just Joel, like, hunting these people down to save Ellie. And there's no other option. Like, it's not is this a good decision or not? There's only one choice. And you are steaming forward and killing anyone who's in your way. And that's at least how I felt in the game, because you are Joel and you're trying to save this girl you care about. And like you said, it was 10 years ago, and I'm 20, I was probably 21 or 22 then. And, my thinking on the world is probably a little more, I'd hope, a little more wiser now. And you kind of see the nuance in the gray, but it wasn't then. And I wasn't even aware until years later that there was this question of, like, did you do the right thing? I'm like, of course I did. I saved her.
Yeah.
And like, you also got to live in the, blissful ignorance that I didn't know that there was a part 2 coming. So I didn't need to think about the consequences of my decision. I just got to say, I saved her, and we can head back to Jackson and enjoy life together. And that's it. I don't need to think about the ramifications.
Yeah, well said. I mean, we could do a whole podcast on that decision and that decision alone, and still not be any closer to an answer than when you asked the question the first time.
Yeah. I think I have shifted a little more on the spectrum towards this was a selfish decision by Joel, and Ellie should have had some say. But I also agree with you. I mean, I do think it makes sense that Ellie should have some say. I'm also like, I think she's 13 or 14. And that's like tough to place that type of decision in a kid's hand. But like you said, this is not like you're bringing her to MIT with a guarantee that this is going to work. Yeah, you're putting your trust and faith in this girl's life in the hands of what is seen as a terrorist organization. And you don't know if it's going to work.
It's not even a guarantee. You would need to maybe have more information to make that decision. There's not even a high likelihood of success.
Yeah, it's probably sub 50%.
Honestly, and I realize I'm not a doctor. I have no medical training. They don't really explain the science behind it anyway. I cannot imagine in that situation that procedure does anything more than become a learning experience.
Yeah.
And learning what they may need in the future.
Yeah.
That they might need another person who's immune to get it. And Ellie might be the only one. And then what's the alternative? It doesn't work. Marlene's there. Marlene knows exactly how Ellie became infected. Are the Fireflies going to start abducting pregnant women and having people bite them right before they give birth so that they can hopefully get somebody who's immune to keep doing the study?
Oof, yeah, I didn't even think about that.
I mean, just thinking through it's easy to say Joel shouldn't have done it or Joel was selfish, but it's not that easy. I have a hard time discussing it with people who think it's so black and white.
Yeah.
For various reasons, because it's just not. In my opinion, I don't think you can view it as black and white. If you've like you said, we're older, we see the world a little bit differently. I also am a lot better at thinking things through now and like what are all the possible outcomes that could have happened based on this decision. It's really tough.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree 100%. And it kind of leaves you, even when I played the game the first time, it definitely doesn't leave you with the warm fuzzies after it, because you realize that Ellie knows Joel is lying to her, and you kind of walk off and you get that beautiful score from Gustavo, and you just kind of feel confused and like complicated and these intense feelings. And that's kind of in my opinion, a brave thing for a story to do, like leave you feeling like that. So I'm curious, like how does a story like that land for you when there's like not this like pretty little bow and we save the world? Like how does that land for you?
I am a glutton for emotional punishment in TV. So this landed exactly how I wanted it to. I love a good drama. I want something that can bring me to tears. I want something that will make me question everything I thought about life and how I would act in situations. So it nailed that for me.
Yeah.
But I don't know how you feel about the emotional punishment that is this show, but
I agree. I think after I beat it, I probably went back and restarted the chapter at the start of breaking into the hospital and saving her like 3 times, just so I could keep, massacring these Fireflies and saving Ellie. And I was just like, hurt me, baby. Like, just destroy me right now. And it's so true. Like, I would rather walk away feeling, because that's the thing that generates this type of discussion. If it ends, really, really pretty and the plane lands, with no turbulence on the runway. I don't know. Maybe I don't know what it is, but I don't feel like the journey was as meaningful if it's like that, where when there's this confusion, it's like, this is kind of, kind of realistic. This is life, and it just it resonates way more.
I will say it took me a few days
Yeah.
to feel better after the last episode.
Few days, yeah.
And I remembered
multiple years.
I was upset for like a week after the game.
Mm-hmm.
And the show did it to me all over again.
Yeah.
And in a sense, it's really cool that they recreated that feeling.
Yeah.
In such an impactful way.
Yeah, and I think that this is where, you know, this podcast is why I care about it, is because after I finish things like that, that's where I go and I want to listen to, you know, Neil Druckmann on, you know, my nerd video game podcast talking about it. And I just want to hear other people thinking through their experience with it. And I love that. Before we break and move on to the categories, anything else that's kind of, you know, within episodes 4 through 9 that we won't talk about then that you just want to shout out?
I know we talked about it last time too, but I thought the visuals throughout the rest of the show and the way they brought different locations to life from the game was incredible. And I don't know if we want to go into that anymore because we did talk about it a lot, but just a shout out to the second half of the season. I would be
production design.
That
it was so good.
S tier.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, we actually didn't I don't think we mentioned that in the last episode, but
we didn't.
I don't know if we did. You were spot on though. That like the way they build out this world, I think we might have.
Yeah, because we talked about Boston and how they brought it to life. And
do you have a favorite? Something that stands out, like a favorite, like wow, they got the visual vibe right of this from the season.
The two that are jumping out at me are Jackson. I thought that was exactly what it was in the game and exactly what I was hoping for. And the other thing that I think they nailed was the hospital in season 9.
Yeah.
I think, you know, in the winter and in episode 5 with Kansas City, things are a little bit different and they were okay. That was great. You know, there wasn't the same, almost like finality of thought to what the location should be.
Yeah.
You know, those were definitely up for interpretation a little bit more, I think, in this format. But I think they really nailed Jackson, and that's important because next season, spoiler. And I think they really nailed the hospital because it felt just like what we talked about with episode 1, where it was almost like a shot-for-shot remake. It just felt really exact.
Yeah.
And in a moment that needed to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So true. I think one of the things that I think about was the first time, I want to say it was episode 2, where we see one of the infected that almost like gets like the body becomes like glued to the wall, like where the fungus is spreading out. The first time I saw that in the show, I was like, wow, this looks so good. And we talk about this all the time. I'm such a sucker for practical effects. And like, you know, that none of that is CGI'd there. You can just tell that it looks so good. Something else, I thought that Kansas City looked really good as a whole when they're there. Yeah. Like that kind of overthrown town. There was a lot of just fun stuff there that I loved. Like I think it was right when they first get to Kansas City, when Joel crashes the car and kills the one guy, and you hear the one guy from the militia there, you know, scream like out like, "You motherfucker!" Like that. Like when you're in the game and you kill anybody and they find like the dead body, they're always like shouting something out, and I thought that was like just like such a fun callback to that. That was great. But yeah, production design. One thing we didn't actually mention, I loved when they brought Ellie's pun book in, and we might be stepping on the Easter eggs a little bit, but it was almost like episode 4 was when I felt Bella really hit their stride as Ellie, like moving forward. It was like, and I think that's because Joel started to open a little bit to her to see that dynamic. And like, I just love that episode so much, where it starts with Joel feeling still really grumpy about being read these puns. And then the episode ends with her acting like she has something serious to tell him before they fall asleep. And she gives him the, the diarrhea, it runs in your genes, pun. And Joel just like can't help but like crack himself up to sleep. And I was like, oh, she finally got Joel. Like, you see him like growing in his love for her. And it was still young and innocent then. But I loved the pun book coming out.
Yeah, that was going to be my Easter egg. That's my favorite Easter egg from the show.
The pun book
from the game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I love a good dad joke. I love a good pun. And I laughed at every single one of those jokes.
Yeah, I know. They're so good. And what was I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, it was in the Jackson episode of the TV show. I can't remember if they did it in the game too, but when they walk up to the dam and Ellie goes, "Damn." And Joel is like, "You're no Will Livingston." I was like, that one, yeah, that one gave me a good laugh. Anything else you wanna shout out from these episodes before we move on?
No, because I feel like I would be encroaching on the next discussion.
Yeah, cool. Let's do it.
All right. So, every episode categories, we got to hit what's the best game scene? What was it for you in the game that really drove that love of it to where it's going to be an all-time classic for you?
Yeah. For me, it's Ellie against David. I think the whole winter sequence is my favorite chapter, whatever you want to call it, of a video game that's ever been done. I think the build-up between switching back and forth between Joel and Ellie in that chapter, and just starting out when you see Ellie hunting the rabbit in the game, and then it slowly dawns on me like, oh wait, I'm controlling Ellie now. And you like push the joystick forward and you realize you're controlling her. It was like, whoa, like freaked me out. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe we're playing it. And I started getting this constriction in my chest of like, is Joel going to die here? And they're going to start teaching me how to play with Ellie. And so my emotions and my like anxieties were already shooting through the roof. And then to have it go through this whole chapter of, Ellie getting the medicine and then getting captured. And then Joel, and you're waking up and you're trying to get back to Ellie. And you see the danger and just the absolute creep that this guy is. And, you get to the restaurant, and I just remember the restaurant is on fire and there's those broken plates on the ground. And every time you step on him, David catches you and kills you. And I'm just getting so stressed. And you're Joel fighting through the storm, trying to get to the restaurant. And then that moment when you're playing the game, when you finally catch David and, he knocks you down and you're mashing, I think it's like the square button to reach for the machete. And then you just crack him in the face. And then Ellie just goes ballistic on him. And, is just hacking away. And then finally, as Joel gets there, and grabs her from behind, and does, I cannot do the Troy Baker, Joel deep voice, but, the oh baby girl. And, I don't think I've ever felt so much emotion and pure adrenaline in a video game ever than trying to get to Ellie. And the moment you finally actually kill David and just not knowing that is when the game kind of breaks open for me. And I'm like, I don't know now where this is ending, because Joel is in peril and Ellie is in peril, and they might not make it out of this, one of them. And I think that's the first time I was really reckoning with that. And then to just see Ellie in just such clear danger from this guy, it was just so much for me. But it has become, and probably always will be, my favorite video game scene ever.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely with what you said. The only thing that I might add is the entire game, I felt that this is absolutely the type of game where a main character dies.
Yeah.
And they are not afraid to just write somebody out of it. And in that moment, I agree with you that it really felt like both of us weren't making it out.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, I felt that Ellie had to be the one to go on in the story. So I really thought it was the end of Joel, not Ellie. Yeah. But I agree with everything you just said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so good. How does that compare then to you for the best show scene? What would you say the best show scene is?
When Henry had to see that Sam turned.
Yeah.
That is the most impactful scene, I think, of all 9 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first time I wanted to cry. I might have actually cried when I watched that, because that was so hard to see. And I think the show did a brilliant job showing Henry's love for Sam and what he was willing to do to just help Sam, despite him being sick. It just tugged at all of the heartstrings. Yeah. And then it ended the way it did.
Yeah.
And that was awful.
What did I do? Give me the gun. Give me the gun. Give me the gun, Henry. Give me the gun. Henry, no!
Yeah, that is a moment I'll never forget in the game. And then in the show, like, we might have mentioned this a little bit earlier, I didn't think that they could make something like that better. And they really did in the show.
Yeah.
They really did. And I was listening to some special features, and one of the things that they said was, Craig Mazin, the writer and showrunner, said he didn't want to NPCize the characters in the show. And for those who don't play video games, they don't, it's a non-playable character. He said he didn't, he wants you to meet Kathleen in Kansas City and understand, like, what are Henry and Sam running from and why? And, like, who are these people that live here and what just happened? And not just have them be hordes of either militia or raiders or infected. That works in a game because that's the gameplay loop. But in the show, you have the opportunity to explore and build that out a bit. And I think realizing what has gone on in Kansas City, and then with Kathleen, and why Henry and Sam are on the run, and then thinking you made it out. And I think that I would start that scene almost when Ellie and Sam get to the room at the end of the night and they're having the conversation, and Ellie's also saying, she doesn't want to end up alone and she's scared too. And I think the most devastating thing is that, she wakes up in the morning and she calls to him and he can't hear her, which makes me think that there is still a part of Sam that's alive inside of him, which was his biggest fear. And then he attacks her. And then, just that shock of Henry killing Sam and then it was just, and then they had to replay it for us at the start of the next episode. And I'm like, why are you doing this to me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was, Oh.
Yeah, I think I agree that I think that is the best show scene.
What other contenders did you have?
Like I said, I mean, I think within that episode too, the horde of infected and all of that going on, there's something specific that I really liked there. One, it felt so video gamey, and I love that.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
it was more fun a little bit at the start. Two, and this is actually something my girlfriend pointed out, I didn't realize it. She said what she loved so much about this scene was that Ellie and Joel were separated when Joel is in the house, and it's the first time that they're apart, even if it's 100 feet away.
Really?
And you feel this anxiety of like, oh my God, like they're separated right now. And she said that really heightened her anxiety during that. But then you also see this look passing between Joel and Ellie when he's sniping of like, they trust each other, and Ellie's going to make a run to save Henry and Sam under the car. And Joel knows she's going for it, and I got to protect her. And like, you see all this nonverbal trust happening between them, which I loved a lot. So that was up there.
That's a great call out.
Yeah.
That is a great call out.
Yeah. She was the intelligent one there. I didn't even think of that on my own, but I'm going to steal it right here on the episode. Yeah. So I love that one. I mean, there's the obvious big ones. I would feel I don't do the story justice if I don't call out Ellie's pure joy at seeing the giraffe. That was so impactful in the game, of just like everything that was stolen from her, of just like a normal kid life and getting naively excited about stuff. And then seeing that in the show, that was a great scene.
Really cool. Yeah, that was beautiful.
Yeah.
Just beautiful storytelling.
Yeah. Yeah. There were a lot of others, but I think I agree that Henry and Sam was the biggest gut punch in the show. Favorite episode, if you had to pick one, what would it be? Same one we've been talking about?
Probably, again, 5 or 8. And I think, I mean, we've talked about it both so much in this, so I won't, labor the point, but great point that it felt video gamey. It really felt like a callback to everything we did for so many hours in that game. We saw a bloater. I was so excited to see a bloater and how they did it.
Yeah.
And they nailed it. He's coming out of the ground. There's the fire behind him, and he's the ultimate like brute force bad guy. Like, that is exactly how that needed to happen.
Yeah.
I think.
For you personally, how does that representation feel of seeing another bloater out there in the world just doing his thing?
It's a very we're a very underrepresented community.
Yeah,
me and the bloaters.
The bloater community.
It was great to see a brother on screen looking scaly and blue and pink and
getting that
fat.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was happy for you. I was really, really happy for you.
I appreciate that. I remember you texted me and you said, "This is big for your kind." Yeah.
Yeah. I think if I'm thinking about favorite episode, there's 4. Which doesn't work for a favorite episode, but I
was like, you have to pick one.
I know. I'm in my top 4. I'm working my way there.
And you picked 4 out of 6.
4 out of 6. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about the whole season. So 4 of 9. So only 50% of the episodes, or 48%, whatever that works out being.
Not much better.
No, I think my favorite episode is Endure and Survive, the Henry and Sam episode.
Mm-hmm.
And my honorable mentions go to When We Are in Need, episode 8, long time, the Bill and Frank episode. And then I also got to give it to the pilot, When You're Lost in the Darkness. I mean, I think the lift that the pilot had to do was immense, and they did it. And it was a great episode.
Yeah.
But there's no bad episode in this season, but I think Endure and Survive is my winner.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. New category.
What do you have with your best sound effect?
Yeah, new category.
Let me take it, because I agree with you, so I'm going to let you take this one.
Cool. Hit it.
I mean, I guess after that, like, what was your favorite use of sound effects? I mean, we had so many really cool ones throughout the game. You had to pick one. What is it?
I think it's the easy answer, but I think it's also the right answer. They got the clickers. Like and I mean, that is from a sound and a like body choreography, if that's the right word, of just that episode 2, getting to see the first clicker. I don't know if I've ever been as excited for something scary in my life as I was to see a clicker on screen. And it sounded so good. Like literally perfect.
Did they use the sounds from the game? Or did they redo that?
I think they redid them. Because, once again, in the special features, they have some behind the scenes of the people who do the clicker noise. And it's like really weird to see people just yelling into a mic like we're doing now, but doing clicker noises. But super awesome. I mean, I think that is I think the voice and sound effects of all of the infected were really strong and felt really just believable and real. I thought that was really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You agree?
That was a great one. Yeah, I also thought they did a really good job with like background sounds. There were times where it kind of felt like the background got a little loud, but it was intentional and it was appropriate and well done. Like think like Boston, right? I think, when they're in the woods and you hear the birds chirping and, in the winter episode and you hear the snow crunching, and it was just, I know those are sounds that aren't unique to this at all, but they were really well done.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you watch things and it's missing, or they're so focused on the characters that you don't get some of that ambient noise, and they did it very well here.
Yeah, that also makes me think of the lack of sound in episode 9 when Joel is making his way to the hospital room. They completely cut and all you hear is the shotgun shells and the reloading.
Yeah.
Just some good choices they made.
Great sound choice. Yeah.
All right. Another new category, best needle drop. I got 3 contenders. I want to rattle off to see what your favorite is. And maybe you have another, I'm not sure. We had Long, Long Time by Linda Ronstadt. I guess it can be her version, or it could be, I assume you're not going to do Frank's version, but maybe Bill's version counts, Nick Offerman's. Alone and Forsaken, the Hank Williams song that plays when they leave Bill and Frank's and they're in the truck. And then the other big one I thought this season was the Never Let Me Down Again by Depeche Mode, which makes 2 appearances. What would you go for best needle drop?
What were the Depeche Mode appearances? Which one's that?
The first one was in the pilot episode, 80s Means Trouble, and Depeche Mode plays into the credits off the radio.
Oh.
And then the second was actually, this is a little bit of an Easter egg or almost IMDb trivia, was at the end of episode 6, the Jackson episode. Craig Mazin's daughter sings a cover of this in the credits, which is pretty cool.
Okay.
What is your favorite needle drop in the season?
Mine was the Hank Williams song. I didn't know until just now that it was called Alone and Forsaken. And I probably should have looked that up beforehand, but I did know it was Hank Williams, and I thought that was really well placed.
Yeah, that one, it does really ground you in that scene, and it is a direct pull, I believe, from the game. So it just makes you feel like you're in that world a little bit more. It's tough to pick between those. The Long, Long Time is just that whole episode was also incredible. Great. But also, I love Depeche Mode, so that was a big one for me. But I would probably go Alone and Forsaken. It would have felt super Last of Us. And Joel just loves some Hank Williams, I'm sure. So
Joel ate Hank Williams up.
Yeah, definitely. What are you going for best adaptation choice?
I think we're going to agree here. Sam being deaf was one of the coolest choices, I think, and most impactful choices to a show. maybe of all time. I'm trying to think of other adaptation changes off the top of my head that were as meaningful as this one.
Yeah.
And I'm not really getting anything. It just added, again, we've talked about relationships so many times and how that's the foundation of the story, and him being deaf and them showing Henry caring for Sam and the way they had to do that with Sam being deaf was,
yeah,
it rips my heart out talking about him, but
yeah,
I love that choice.
Yeah, it was excellent. And I think they made Sam a little bit younger than in the game to have Ellie seem like more of a older sibling. I think Sam was a little bit older, or at least equal with Ellie in the game.
Okay.
And I think so, like having him be younger, bringing in this area of representation that actually, is kind of really overlooked in Hollywood. It just worked so well. I mean, it made everything about it so much more interesting. Henry and Sam's dynamic, and just like it gave you these warm fuzzies of like how they communicate and how the amazing device of like that etch and sketch pad. It was awesome. And seeing Ellie and Sam still build that relationship, and play while they're in that like underground bunker. Like you said, it just makes it all the worse. And and I think that like Henry and Sam in general, I think is the best adaptation choice as I think about it, because just getting to spend more time with them and see why they were on the run, what's going on, where they're coming from, where they're going. It was just excellent. And, we said we're gluttons for punishment, and boy, they did it right here.
Yeah.
They really did.
I think I agree. I think you're right. Henry and Sam might have been the best adaptation choice of definitely of these last 6 episodes.
Absolutely.
I guess, but with that being the best, what's the worst for you?
I think minor. I mean, we had a big conversation on bricks and bottles at the start here. Having no throw of a brick or bottle to me is egregious. Like almost, if you want to talk about how you build faith, this is one way to break trust with an audience, is to not have a brick or bottle. I just couldn't believe, like, I know it's silly, but like, I just couldn't believe that they didn't literally have them throw one brick or bottle. I just couldn't believe
not
it.
One.
Like literally not one. I don't even think we saw one.
No loose bricks.
None.
All that destruction. Like, wait, no loose bricks.
Yeah. What is happening here?
That's fair.
Yeah. Just couldn't believe it.
That's totally fair.
I've got 2 other contenders.
What else you got?
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, let's hear them. No, yeah, I was just asking you what else you had.
Yeah, I had 2 other contenders, and I don't know if you have any. I would have liked maybe one more infected scene in the final 2 episodes. I have a vivid memory of the end of the game right before you get into the hospital. I think this is where you get caught, is you're having like a big fight with these bloaters in this like underground freeway almost, or this like freeway tunnel. I just would have liked to see another clicker or runner in those final 2 episodes, one more scene of that. And I thought that the hive mind was a little underutilized. Like they brought this new thing out that all the infected are kind of connected by this hive mind, and hit on that in episode 2. And I don't really feel that kind of like paid off in really any meaningful way. But those were the only ones I really had. Any adaptation choices didn't work for you?
Yeah, I agree on the hive mind being underutilized. I think having the hive mind was a good adaptation choice. And I agree with you that not utilizing it further was, I don't even know if I would call that an adaptation choice. It's just like not my favorite decision that they made in general. I agree with you about the infected. I think my biggest adaptation blunder, if you will, was not having more infected in the show visually. And I'm not even talking about fighting the infected or making it video gamey anymore. But there's so many times where you just like alter your route in the game because there's a bunch of infected. And it would have been cool if there was a couple more times where like when they're walking and talking, or even when they're driving and you're listening to Hank Williams, you could have driven by a couple infected that like kind of come at the car a little bit. Yeah. And I think that would have been really good into building the world that you saw in the video game where you're always worried about them.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I know that they didn't want the series is not about infected, but I agree. I would have liked just a little bit more. Just a little bit more.
That's what I mean. Like that, you have to see them. They're part of the backdrop.
They are.
They're part of the world. And if you're going to make it part of the backdrop, make it part of the backdrop. Just a couple nods here and there to what we went through.
Yeah, I agree.
You know? You don't need, like I said, you don't even have to see them close up. You don't have to fight them. You don't have to interact with them. But
sneaking around them.
They're walking along that freeway. You look over, you see a bunch of infected below. You're driving in the car and you see some infected take a couple steps towards you as you're driving. Just things like that make build the tension of, or I think would have built the tension of, this world is dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
Dude, hit me with some Easter eggs, Randy.
Yeah. I'm not going to say anything more, but there's a certain person who pops up in Jackson in the background that is clearly a very pivotal character in The Last of Us Part 2. And my heart jumped when I saw them in the background. I'll say no more, but if you know, you know. That was great. My only other Easter eggs, you see the sign for Ish when they're in the basement playing, Ellie and Sam. And if you played the game and you found all the notes, you got to read the story of this guy Ish, who was a hero. And that was awesome. I loved the little shout out to Ish. In the second episode, Ellie says that she can't swim, which is just like, in the game, basically 40% of the game is pushing Ellie around on these pallets because she can't swim. And I like literally cracked up at that. And then
it would have saved so much time if we just taught her to swim.
Literally, just
in the first part of the game.
Literally have swimming practice for 10 minutes and she could probably get it down, Joel. Like, and also, do pallets even float that well? It didn't make any sense to me. I was like, I feel like that would sink instantly.
Now we've got to test it.
Yeah, seriously.
We'll put it on the Instagram.
Yeah, it's Titanic too. And the only other one I had was when Joel and Ellie are talking about what they would want to do after, and Ellie says something to the effects of space or astronaut, and she starts talking about Sally Ride. And if you've played part 2, you know why that's meaningful. Do you have any other Easter eggs?
The pun book.
Pun book, yeah.
Was one of the best. Was my favorite Easter egg.
Yeah. Just hilarious, honestly.
Yeah. It's funny every time. Every time it's funny. I don't know what that says about my sense of humor, but
yeah, I mean, just love a good pun. I mean, they even get Joel at, she beats him down with them after a while. Like, there's just always that one pun that nestles its way into your heart. All right, I want to move on to best quote, and I have a few potentials, albeit I don't know if it's super quotable, and I don't know why I feel that way. But there's a few big ones. There's for sure, and I don't even know if this is actually said out loud, but I'm pretty sure it was Ellie or Joel sees a written on the wall in the first episode, the classic, "When you're lost in the darkness, look for the light." There's that one.
Good one.
Here's a good one. I did like the Tess, save who you can save.
Save who you can save.
Before she makes out with the infected. And but one that I think hit me more in the show, I mean, it definitely hit me in the game, was when Ellie is having kind of her, meltdown and is, saying like, I was never afraid before you showed up. Everybody's left me but you. That those were really good. And then the only other potential one I'd throw out, which actually didn't make it into the show, which I really liked in the game, and I cannot imitate a Troy Baker Joel voice. It is deep even for me. But when he tells Ellie, you're treading on some mighty thin ice, in his like southern, I was like,
treading on some mighty thin ice.
Yeah.
Not her, you know.
What?
Maria told me about Sarah.
Ellie? You are treading on some mighty thin ice here.
I'm sorry about your daughter, Joel, but I have lost people too.
You have no idea what loss is.
Everyone I have cared for has either died or left me. Everyone fucking except for you. So don't tell me that I would be safer with someone else, because the truth is I would just be more scared.
But I was just like, I was waiting for Pedro to do it, but I was like, maybe that's just a Troy Baker quote that no one else can kind of hit for Joel. But those were a few big. Is there any quote that sticks out to you?
No, I mean, the one that stuck out to me was save who. I mean, we've used it multiple times throughout this podcast. Save who you can save.
Mm-hmm. I think I would go save who you can save is probably the best, especially because I felt like Tess came in and was just throwing 110 miles an hour for those 2 episodes she was in. She was just incredible. And then I think she really launched the Joel and Ellie journey and set Joel, on this new path he has. So I would go with that too.
It sets up the end. And I think one of the things that great writers and showrunners do is there's no throwaway comments. There's nothing you see that doesn't come back. And when you say save who you can save, and then you look at the end of the show, I mean, it's the perfect like foreshadowing to what his decision Joel's going to make in the end. And whether that exact line is in the game or not, it's a brilliant piece of writing to set up this show. And I think, credit where credit's due. The writers did a fantastic job with not leaving anything to be just kind of a throwaway ever.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a great point. I kind of didn't even make that link between, Tess saying that and Joel's decision at the end. It's a nice spot.
Yeah.
The real villain. Who you got?
Dude, I got freaking global governments. Scientists were calling out that we need to prepare for this. Everyone ignored them, and here we are.
Yeah.
Global government. And the first scene in the show highlights it so well. I don't think we really ever get into it in the game the way we do in the show. But
no.
I mean, with the very first scene of that show, I knew immediately who I was going to say my villain was.
Mm-hmm. Just so quick to not so quick to respond. The complete opposite of that. So slow to respond. The government. And like, I mean, obviously I've never been in that situation in a government, and I can't imagine it's like easy to like comprehend that reality, but they definitely could have done better.
Yeah.
To say the least.
Sounds like nothing. What the hell is Fedra? Like that was not.
Yeah. It's like a militia FEMA. I agree with that. I mean, they were probably the ones who failed the world the most. The only other one, and I don't think this is entirely, from my own thinking, but just the questioning, like, is love the real villain here? And I was thinking a lot of the I think I referenced it earlier, this Hollywood Reporter article that I was reading that actually came out. There was one that came out a long time ago when Neil first was shopping the game, and then one that recently, and they were just, this big thing was thinking about what if this is a story not about the infected and the scary things in this world, but what if it's about this unconditional love a parent feels for a child and the beautiful things that could come out of that, and also the really horrible things that could come out of that, is what Neil said. And what they really hit on, as you watch kind of like those, HBO always does those like after the episodes, and they really were hitting on how that love can be so dangerous because it really gets you tunnel vision. And that's not a fault or a criticism at all that they have of Joel. You know, I think Neil and Craig are both parents and said the same thing, but it's like you just feel this unconditional love that you would literally do anything for, so that anything that could potentially harm that, even if Joel could rationally understand the benefits of what Ellie might be able to do for the world, you know, that is now his baby girl, and that is not going to happen. So that's my only like artsy fartsy perspective on who the villain might be. But I agree. I mean, I think at the start, who failed everyone the most was these governments. And then you see that, you know, I haven't watched The Walking Dead, but everyone always says, you know, it's the people, not the zombies, that are the baddies. So I could see both of those, but that was just my interpretation.
I'll tell you what though, not to jump to another category, when we're talking about who won, you know, the game in the show. For the show, I had two, and one of them was love won the show.
Yeah,
I think. And I'm going to go in the opposite direction and say that what they showed us, you know, throughout with Sam and Henry, Bill and Frank.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going through what is by far the hardest period in human history.
Yeah.
Right? It's literally apocalyptic. There's no making this out. And I say the hardest period. I'm sure someone's going to be like, well, there was an ice age and there was this and that, whatever.
Yeah.
Modern, you know, in recent history, nothing would beat that. And love won. Like, people find each other. They fall in love. They take care of their siblings. People are still having children. I mean, they're living this life together with another human being. And yeah, it's difficult and hard. And there's bloaters and clickers and whatever other type of
cannibals.
Freaking! I was just talking about the zombies. I wasn't even talking about how bad the people are.
Yeah.
But love still won. Yeah. And love still survived. And and it brings people together even in a time of awful. I mean, look, Tommy got married. Tommy's about to have a kid. Yeah. That's beautiful. In that setting, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I also had HBO winning the show. I'm going to just knock that out real quick. But I guess while we're here, who did you have winning the game in the show?
I think for the show, I'll start there. I would say I have thought about this a lot, and it might be no surprise after listening to this whole episode, but I really think I would say combo Bella Ramsey, Ellie won the show. And that is my own predisposition. I don't know if that's the right word for this, but just like my own love for Ellie as a character. But I also feel that the entire weight of this working rested on their shoulders, because we have seen, and I think Pedro did an excellent job as Joel, not taking anything away from him. But that is a character that often works. I think we used the trope before, like the lone wolf and cub. That lone wolf is always a beloved character. I think of like Cormac McCarthy's The Road, or something like that, or Pedro in The Mandalorian. Like, you can't help but love Mando, and I mean, I love Baby Yoda too, but you can't help but love Mando. And like that character, you're like designed to really love them because they are taking this cub in and trying to protect them from the world, and you want to root for them. Like that's an easy one to get behind. And I don't think Ellie all the time is. I think a plucky child character can like really be annoying. We talked about it in Jurassic Park, like the way that Lex was written in the book. Like, oh my God, like so terrible.
Could not stand her.
Yeah. And like, I think there was the most risk for this character just like not working in the show if they didn't get the personality right. And Bella just killed it. And it was, I talked about this, it was the one I had the most anxiousness watching at the start, because I'm like, are they going to get it? Is it going to work? Is it going to translate? And it was kind of when they got into, you know, I was sold pretty early on, but it was really when we talked about like, you know, episode 4 with the pun book, where I was just like,
yeah,
Bella has it. Like, no doubt, this is Ellie. Like, they did it. So I would say Bella won the show for me. I think also she just had the most pressure from toxic online fans to like live up to this. Like, there was the most risk for her to like reach those expectations is like not an easy feat.
Yeah, I think that's a good take on Bella. I really think that's a good take on a winner of the show.
Little coffee break. Game. If I was placing myself, I don't know. I think this is more of a macro perspective if I went pretty micro on Bella for the show. But I think for the game, Gamers kind of won with this one.
Okay.
In that I think that this, I can't even say it redefined kind of the direction of gaming in PlayStation, because Uncharted had already come out. And I think for those who like are gamers and play PlayStation games, they're very known for doing kind of like this action adventure game, over the shoulder camera view. That's kind of their bread and butter. They have the Uncharted, they have The Last of Us, they have God of War, Bloodborne, you know, you name it. That is like what they do. And I think that this, while Uncharted was amazing and I deeply love it, this was another further example of like games can really be more than just a game. Like, they can be a serious form of storytelling. And it's not, we talked about this, it's not that games didn't do this before and tell great stories before. There are many games that did that. But this was one that just for some reason really moved the needle.
Mm-hmm.
And was the first game I really remember people saying, like, wow, we need to see this adapted into something. And, you know, now we arrive in 2023, whatever year we're in, and the landscape is just different. Like, this is a hugely successful TV show based on a video game, like something we've never seen before. And also, like, gaming is like, I wouldn't say it's completely cool now, but it's definitely cooler than it was when we were kids.
Yeah.
You know, it was just like, it was like a nerdy hobby that, like, you know, people did. And like, it's very different now. Like, games are so much in the culture and such a huge industry. And I think Last of Us had a big part in doing that. And it's like, you know, seeing the show come out, it's like, we won. Like, people can see that like video games can tell really amazing stories and be an art form on par with books and movies. And I know that's like such a cliche that gamers have been saying forever, but it's true. So I feel that gamers really won with this one.
I think this is really funny that you say that, because I feel like, and I'm going to have to go back and check the tape, that when we're picking winners, if I pick a concept, you pick a person, or if I pick a person, you pick a concept, and you and I are like, we don't plan that. Like, I know people are going to be like, oh, you planned it. No, this is generally just keeps happening. I feel like, because for the winner of the game, I picked Joel. Because he's such a beloved character and people loved playing through him. And he was, you know, that lone wolf, that was the perfect character for this type of game. And everybody just fell in love with Joel. And I think, to be honest, the show did a better job of bringing Ellie to life as the lead than the game did, because the game, that was Joel's show. And you were like, Joel's a badass, Joel's this, that, blah, blah, blah. Joel's decision, you know? So I picked Joel, and I think gamers loved him. I think he's going to go down as an all-time character in a video game.
Yeah. I think he's already in the Hall of Fame.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah, should be. I mean, I don't disagree. And it's funny because, like, in the Who Won the Game show, I actually, you know, kind of pulling back the curtain a little bit, you know, we always have these like in-depth show notes, and usually I'm typing out all my thoughts prior, but I didn't have my answers in here for this one because I was really thinking on this live up until we recorded this. So I had no idea what you were going to say.
Yeah.
So I really, you know, I didn't go the opposite direction of you intentionally. It was just like really what I was feeling on not knowing at all what you were thinking. But I agree with that too. Joel. Sorry. No, you're good. Joel is a kind of defining character that will probably be talked about for decades in terms of gaming characters, and there is no doubt about that.
Yeah.
So I can't begrudge that response at all. All right, let's wrap this up and move on to the closing. You know, was this a good adaptation?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
This was absolutely a good adaptation.
Yeah.
This is exactly the type of adaptation that leads to us wanting to do a podcast. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly.
This is it was almost perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So based on our previous two, we got Jurassic Park and The Shining. In terms of ranking adaptations, where do you think this one fits in?
All right. I'm going to throw a disclaimer that I don't think we're allowed to tie things, especially in the top 5.
Yeah.
So because of that, I'm going to put it at number 1, although I think it had a distinct advantage of being filmed, 30 years after Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
And I think if the original Jurassic Park had come out at this time with the quality that adaptation was, because I think it's much better than the Jurassic World stuff, I might feel differently. But just because both are so special effects driven, it's an unfair advantage, but I got to put it at number 1.
Yeah, I agree. I'll be interested when we get to a ranking of where we disagree and how we kind of how we compromise on where these fit in. That's going to be interesting.
I think we have to settle it the only way gentlemen settle anything, with a best of 3 rock, paper, scissors.
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah. You read my mind. Yeah, I mean, this might be surprising, but I think that this comes in number 1 for me. And that's big because Jurassic Park is very near and dear to me, obviously being the first episode of this show. But I think The Last of Us, it does everything you want an adaptation to do. It's faithful, they care about the source material, and they expand in the right areas, which is awesome. Like, you come away with this feeling like you more fully understand this world than you did entering the show.
Yes.
And with Jurassic Park, you don't really come away with that. You just come away with, man, I just watched one of the greatest blockbuster movies ever. And Steven Spielberg put his own flair on this story. And I think both are great in their own rights, but there's some noticeable changes. No shade at all to Jurassic Park, but I think that this is kind of number 1 at the moment.
Yeah. And to add to that, something I think we've talked about a few times now, the limitations of a movie versus a TV show. They had, so back then movies were only 90 minutes. So Spielberg had to take that book and make that whole adaptation 90 minutes long. Whereas The Last of Us was 10 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, if they had done a Last of Us movie, it probably wouldn't have been The Shining or beaten Jurassic Park. It would have probably been pretty low on our list because you can't do a video.
I don't know how they would have done that.
So I think, but that's also part of what makes it great, is having the right choice. And I realize again that this is 30 years later, so things are much more available for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm actually surprised you put it ahead of Jurassic Park. I didn't think you were going to do that.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to put it at number 2. Yeah.
Just want to keep you on your toes. Well, should we hit the outro here? Wrap it up?
Yeah, man. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Next episode will be coming to you live from the sand dunes of Arrakis, where we'll be doing our best to get our eyes to turn from a dirt brown to a beautiful blue. That's right, my friends. We'll be covering the Dune 2021 adaptation and discussing our thoughts for the upcoming sequel. Randy, I have some pretty aggressive thoughts on this. How are you feeling about it?
Nick, inject that spice in my veins. Let's go.
All right. I like it. As always, if you have any suggestions for future stories you would like to see us cover, give us a shout out at readwatchplaypod@gmail.com or at readwatchplaypodcast on Instagram. You can find us on all your major platforms, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please rate and review, 5 stars only, as these things help more people find the show. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thanks again, Randy, for hosting this. And until next time, everybody, remember, save who you can save.
Love it. Thanks, everyone.